A very warm good evening to everyone. I am Saksham Singh Parmar, the host of today's session. I, on behalf of the whole team of Just Corpus, welcome you all in today's session on equity in action, understanding and applying gender neutral legal frameworks for harassment. Before we delve into today's discussion, let me provide a brief introduction of Just Corpus and our eminent guest speaker of the day. About Just Corpus, I would like to say that Just Corpus is a body of legal professionals who have come together to bring various aspects and chains of law under a single umbrella. Just Corpus, an EdTech platform set up in year 2020, has a wide reach of 600,000 clicks per month on an average basis on our website, which is www.justcorpus.com. The inspiration was derived from the ever-growing need for law students. Just Corpus has also incorporated an interdisciplinary journal and a multidisciplinary journal as its subsidiaries, named the Just Corpus Law Journal and the International Journal of Legal Research, Education, and Social Sciences. Now, turning our attention to today's focal point and most important point, we are very, very privileged to have Sakshi Kothari ma'am as our esteemed guest speaker. About Ms. Sakshi, I would like to say that Ms. Sakshi Kothari is a distinguished advocate at the Madhya Pradesh High Court, bringing a robust academic foundation and extensive practical experience to her legal practice. She holds a BBA LLB degree from Amity University, complemented by an LLM in International Trade and Investment from Gujarat Maritime University and a certified POSH trainer from GNLU Gandhinagar. She has honed her expertise through active participation in various training programs and seminars, both as a volunteer and a speaker. Her comprehensive understanding of legal principles, combined with her hands-on experience, makes her a formidable advocate in her field. I hand over the field to Ms. Sakshi ma'am.
Hello everyone. I hope I am audible to you all.
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay. So the topic of discussion is today the understanding and applying the gender neutral legal frameworks for harassment. So firstly, we will be starting the overview, what I will be telling in this 1 hour, the introduction of the gender neutral laws. Secondly, we will be understanding what are the laws that are being implemented in India. What are the types of harassment which have been faced by men as well as the women? Global examples of the gender neutral laws. What are the challenges and implementations that the India has been facing for the gender neutral approach? What are the case laws that has been defining the gender neutrality approaches? What are the recommendations that we can opt for it, that we can have a gender neutral approach in our lives? And lastly, we will be followed by question and answer in conclusion. So coming up with the introduction part, we will be talking about what is an harassment. Harassment means any unwelcome behavior, whether it can be verbal, physical, non-verbal, which creates a hostile, intimidating, or an offensive environment. It can occur in the workplaces, public spaces, online platforms, and within the institutions. So let us understand in the common parlance that whenever an harassment is happening, we have to look for the two main ingredients. The first ingredient is the Latin maxim, which is known as quid pro quo, which means this for that or consideration for consideration. Like in an organization, if a male employee has been working and a female employee is working under a male employee and asks for a sexual favors from a female employee, that if you sleep with me, I will give you a promotion in that role. So that is one of the type of an harassment that has been facing in the workplace or the organizations or any of the institutions, universities, colleges, or even schools also. So the main ingredient, we have to look whether quid pro quo, this for that, consideration for consideration has been happening or not, right? And second ingredient is the or a toxic environment. Now, what does that mean? What happens in various organizations? There are the culture diversity that has been in places. Like if in India, a Nigerian person is coming to work in India. Now he don't know what is the culture in this workplace, how I should talk to
Uh, Sakshi ma'am, are you there?
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay. Is the screen visible?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Now is it?
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
So I was explaining that in harassment, we have to look for two ingredients. First, I explained about the quid pro quo. The second ingredient, that is the hostile or a toxic environment. Like in India, a person who is coming from outside the India or an abroad, a Nigerian person is coming to the India to work in that workplace. So he is not well aware that how this workplace and how the diversity and the culture of India has been working. He has entered that office. Now he's looking that there are 4 people groups over there, 3 people groups over there. In which group should I go? So in that case, it is creating a person in a hostile environment, that whether you are not being so familiar with him, so you should talk to him, you should adopt the things with the culture. So while looking into an harassment, we have to look for the two ingredients. First is a quid pro quo, and the second one is a hostile or a toxic environment that has been creating in the workplaces. Now we are talking about the types of harassment. The firstly types of harassment is a workplace harassment, which means that you are abusing someone, you are threatening someone, false rumors, or humiliating a person. Now, spreading false rumors, how does that happen in a workplace? Like what happened? Miss B and Mr. A went on a coffee, right, after the working hours. And in meantime, they've seen Mr. D, who saw them both having a coffee. So he next day he comes to the workplace and makes a rumor, oh, they both were been dating at that place. So yes, this will be amounting to the workplace. Even the Supreme Court have also given the guidelines for the extended workplace. Like, as we already know that we are working from 9 to 5, so this is only the workplace timing, right? But when the situation is happening after the 5 p.m. also, that a person is spreading some false rumors about that employees and the employer, though they were only having their coffee at that moment, but that employee is creating a false rumors in that workplace, will be considered to be an extended workplace. So that has to be kept in the mind, that the workplace harassment is also being taken. Secondly, if we talk about the psychological harassment, which means emotional isolation from the group, you have been denial to contact, you are facing some types of a humiliation from any of the persons that have been there in your workplaces, that you are not liking that peer groups, you are not liking that colleagues group, you are not functioning well with the team. So this will be amounting to the psychological or the emotional and the mental of that person is being sickness, and that is amounting also to an psychological harassment or an emotional harassment. Thirdly, if we talk about the sexual harassment, under our new criminal laws, as you already been aware about it, under the section 75 of the BNS, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, is talking about the sexual harassment, which can happen anywhere, even in the public spaces, even in your workplaces, even in your organizations, even in the colleges, or even in the schools. So the definition have also not been so widened that it is talking about only that a man who has been committing a sexual harassment to a woman. No, so here the gender neutrality approach is not being approachable, so that it is coming up that the sexual harassment has also been taking places, like the sexual favors I already talked about, the examples that I've been discussing, that a female employee was like a male employee has asked from a female employee to sleep. So that is also amounting to in sexual favors. That is also coming under the ambit of in sexual harassment. The favors that are being in the sexual nature or a sexual behavior is amounting to in sexual harassment. Now, if we talk about the cyber harassment, which means stalking, in which a pattern of threat is there, cyberbullying, protecting the minors from the online, that is also amounting to in cyber harassment, which has been taking places. If we talk about the religious harassment, which talks about that a person is converting his own religion, like a Muslim boy is loving a Hindu girl. Now he is forcing that Hindu girl to convert her religion to a Muslim so that I can marry you. So this is also one of the type of an harassment, a religious harassment, forcing involuntary conversions. That is also amounting to an harassment. Now, if we talk about the racial, by the word itself, you can get to know that any of the discriminatory marks, any of the victim differences that have been happening, which has been reluctant to working with them, that is also amounting to an racial harassment. Now, we talk about the verbal harassment, which means you are not calling a person in your workplace by the name. You're calling him by the nickname. You are body shaming that person, that he is a fat boy, that he is a fat girl, right? So this is types of also one of the type of verbal harassment, like you are creating some type of toxic environment for that person, creating such types of derogatory remarks from them. That is also verbal harassment. Lastly, if we talk about the non-verbal, means in a peer group, you are making such types of a drawing that is creating an environment of an harassment to the other employees, right? Like you are making such types of the inappropriate images, posters, or the drawings, so that which has been shared in that workplaces or in that shared spaces, which is causing discomfort to the other employees, are also amounting to the non-verbal harassment, like from the gestures you have been showing that, or creating such type of hostile environment are also considered to be types of an harassment. Now we will be talking about the gender neutral laws that have been followed in our India. So the first law is the POSCO Act 2012, Protection of Children from the Sexual Harassment. If you talk about this preamble of this act, which is talking about that it is protecting both girls and boys from the sexual abuse, that here the definition of a child is including whether it can be a boy, whether it can be a girl, right? Of any gender which can be the victim of the sexual offenses, which deserves the equal protection of the law. Under the section 2, which is talking about the definitions, under subclause you can read about the D clause, which is talking about the child definition that I already explained, that it can be either be a girl or a boy. That is coming under an ambit of a child, explanation of a definition of a child under this POSCO Act. Gender identity or a sexual orientations are also be discussed under this act. Discussing this act with the latest case law that I read upon, the Rakesh versus State of Delhi 2023. What happened in this case? Rakesh, who was an accused, he kept a gun on a minor girl who was only a 7-year-old, just for the sake of financial support that he wants from his father, from his minor girl father, right? So he just kept a gun on that minor girl so that his father could give him some amount of the financial support to that person, so that I can have a good livelihood. Just for the need of money, he just put up a revolver and a gun on that minor girl. So in that case, the court held that the petition has been insensitive, because especially considering the trauma which has been faced by that minor victim, who is only a 7-year-old girl child, which is not subjecting them to further psychological distress, which is lacking in such of a substantive ground. In that case, the accused has put up a question and claiming that he was not harming that girl, just he was doing that for the sake of money, for his livelihood. So in that, the court said that there has been a lack of substantive grounds in this, and said it will be very painful for the girl to go for a cross-examination in this case to answer that whether was this misabuse of this law or not. So this has been held in this case, Rakesh versus State of Delhi, 2023. Second, if we talk about the gender neutrality law, is the Transgender Persons Protections of Rights Act 2019, in which we are talking about the protection and rights of the transgender. This act has been passed with the intention of bringing the gender equality by prohibiting any discrimination against any person. Like in any reservation, if you're going, it might be a quota male, female, or other. So replacing the other by the transgender name is bringing gender neutrality in our India. Any of the discrimination that has been faced on the gender equality by prohibiting against any person, providing them with the equal opportunity. So this act is been aiming for this purpose. Also, later on, we will be discussing about the Nalsa case. Also, we have been assuming that the human bodies can be either a male or a female. So no, we have to change our perspective. It can be either a transgender also. A girl with a long hair, you are considering that a physical appearance is talking about a girl. No, it can be either a transgender. It can be either a lesbian. It can be either a gay, LGBTQ. You already know about that. So these are things that you have to look into the consideration. Also, under this act, the section number 6 and 7 is talking about the certificate of identity. The transgenders are also been receiving the certificate of identity as a valid documentation for their PAN card. Even the Aadhaar cards are also being made, right? Now, if we talk about the Sexual Harassment Act, the POSH Act 2030, which is talking about only protecting the woman from the sexual harassment, but with the effective time of this and growing advocacy, now the organizations have been opting for the POSH policies in the gender neutrality approach. In every organization, there has been an internal committee being set up, in which organizations there are more than 10 employees. The internal committees have been set up, in which 2 are the legal advisors who have been working for the sexual harassment cases. Some of the persons are being attached to the NGOs who are working for the sexual harassment cases. So in that internal committee, there are female and male employees both. But when we talk about the seniority will always be the female employee in that case, but it can change as per the organization culture. If the organization is only opting for the male employees, so the internal committee will only having a male employee, not a female employee in that case. So the POSH policies have been drafted in such a manner so that there can be a gender neutrality approach. Like what happens in some of the organizations, there are the cases that the female are be filing a false allegations or the fabulous false complaint against the men. Though the man is getting a promotion, but a female is not getting a promotion in that case. So the female thought, let's file a false sexual harassment case against this male employee, so that in that place he might be suspended or he might be getting a penalty on him, or whether he might leave that organization. So I might get that promotion. So in that cases also false complaint, frivolous, or any of the malicious complaint are being filed by the female employees, and the strict actions have been taken, the inquiry procedures have been taking places, the conciliation officer are being set up, so that the organization can ensure that the justice has been served to both the employees, whether a man or a woman, right? So each and every individuals are facing a harassment at the work. One of the writers, Susan Bronwiller, said that it can be impossibly said that the biological impossible that a woman asked a man to rape, right? A woman can never ask a man to rape, right? If a woman tells a man that he must have a sex with her, then this argument is already making that a man are being stronger, that they can commit a rape, but the woman cannot. So in this point of view, we can say that men and women both have been experiencing the sexual assault differently, but the woman has to face the social stigma. There are no such norms which have been regulating for the behavior of the man. that has to be looked forth for it. Now, if we talk about the new criminal law, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, which is recognizing the electronic crimes, addressing them with the provisions like the section 76, which is talking about the assault or a use of criminal force to the woman with the intent to disrobe. Also, if we talk about the section number 74, which is talking of outraging her modesty, like in that definition, if you read, it has been given whosoever. So in that whosoever, it can be either a man or a woman, right? But when you read the definition of a gang rape under this Sanhita, so you will come across that in that case, it is written a man who is committing a rape. So over here, the gender neutrality has been not been forming, right? So that has to be look into it. Now, if we talk about the Uniform Civil Code, as you would already be aware that the Article 44 of our Constitution is talking about the Uniform Civil Code. Talking about the India perspective on this, the Goa has been approaching the Uniform Civil Code that the people belonging to all the religion in the Goa are being subjecting to the same laws like the marriage, divorce, succession. So, in this Goa, the gender inclusive language has been approached, right? Which can also be approachable by various other states also, depending on their culture diversity. Now, if we talk about the Constitution of India, Article number 14 is talking about equality before the law and equal protection of the law, right to equal treatment in the similar situation, regardless of their genders of the individuals. Article number 15 is talking about prohibiting discrimination. 16 is talking about ensuring that there is no being discrimination in regards of in public employment. So only due to one's gender identity in the public sectors, this is also making gender inclusive in nature. Now we are talking about the global examples. So I have shared over here the US case, which is talking about the Civil Rights Act. Under this case, what happened? The Bostock versus Clayton County. This was the case in which the employees were being protected against any of the discrimination, interpreting the gender definition. The decision has been expanding the understanding of the sex to be more inclusive, recognizing that the discrimination against the LGBTQ plus individuals is a form of a sex discrimination. So this is the Civil Rights Act of US, which is talking about that the discrimination cannot be only been based on the sex, but also against all the genders, including men, women, and the transgender. Firstly, we have to understand the difference between a gender and a sex. A gender is a social and the culture construct that we have been adopting. Like I already explained, if you're seeing a woman having a long ears, so you're presuming that she is a woman or she's a girl, right? So these are the social and culture construct that we are be considering that yes, this is the gender that you have been imagining that whether this person is a male or a female. But sex is something that is biological character, which can be either a male, female, or an intersex. Physical binary are also some of the examples of the sex when we talk about. Second example is the UK, which is talking about Equality Act 2010, which is including any unwanted behavior relating to the protected characteristics, which is violating the person's dignity and applying to all the genders encompassing the various forms such as verbal, non-verbal, or a physical harassment, which is talking about the anti-discrimination law, equal treatment for all, and promoting an inclusive and equitable environment by ensuring that all the individuals are being protected against the harassment, rather on the basis of their age, disability, gender, reassignment, marriage, civil partnership, pregnancy, maternity, sex orientation, race, religion, belief. So these are some of the examples that have been inculcated in our Equality Act 2010, which is the act of United Kingdom. Now we have been talking about the Sex Discrimination Act 1984, which has been recently amended in 2013, which is including the protection against the discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status, and also this act has been designed for the gender neutral and protects all the genders from the discrimination and harassment in various settings, including employment, education, and accommodation. Apart from these all three, we can also talk about the Canadian Human Rights Act, which is talking about the gender identity or the expressions as a prohibited ground of the discrimination. Germany General Act, which is talking about the equal treatment, 2006 Act. The Norway Act, which is also talking about the Anti-Discrimination Act, 2017. So these are some of the global examples. Also, apart from these, there are also conventions which I've been talking about, like Convention on the Elimination of the Discrimination Against the Women. So these are also the UN which have been creating such type of a principles that have been followed in our India, so that these global examples can be a good examples to have a gender neutrality approach in our India too. Now we have been talking about the challenges that we have been facing in implementation in India for the gender neutral laws. The first one is the culture norms and the biasness, societal expectation, resistance due to the traditional gender roles, biasness which has been resisting in our existing society and the worldwide. Now, if we talk about this case, let me explain you with an example. What happens whenever we have been traveling through a train, right? So there are transgender persons coming and asking for a money, right? So what does our parents does? Our parents do beta soja so that they won't ask us the money, right? That has been very true example that our parents are not letting us talk to them. So now you are the upcoming generation. You have to bring a change in that. Whether you talk to them, you have to bring a approach for the gender neutrality. You have to tell them there are some of the non-governmental organizations which are working for your welfare. So you can tell them and make them approachable so that their rights they also get to know, right? So these are some of the challenges that we have been facing. First one is the culture norms and the biasness. Second, if we talk about the lack of awareness and the training, like inadequate training are being given, insufficient understandings are being given, that the people are not aware about their rights, though they are working like that only for their well-being or their livelihood to be survival. Thirdly, if we talk about underreporting of the harassment, what happens in some of the workplaces, there are the female employees who have been not been reporting just for the sake that if they say something, they might be terminated, their employment might be terminated, they might not get the compensation in their organization, they might not get the bonus salary in that. So these are some of the examples and the fear of retaliation that a person has been facing. So these types should not be faced. Fear of not being taken seriously, the culture silence. So this should not be there in any of the workplace, organization, colleges, schools, any of the places that we have been talking about. Phase 4, legal and policy gaps that I already explained in the gender neutral laws, that while the clear guidelines should be given that if a person who is working in Bangalore, but he is a native of Delhi, now the harassment has been taken place in the Bangalore workplace. Now where he will be filing his case? In his native Delhi High Court or in the working place Bangalore Court or a Karnataka High Court, right? So these types of the clear guidelines should be given to the employees so that the policies gap can be overcome across the jurisdiction, inconsistency with the application, that whether which jurisdiction will be applied or which different regions can be approachable or across any of the religion or leading to any and even protection too. So these are the challenges that we have been discussed. First is the culture norms and the biases. Second is the lack of awareness and training. Fourth is the legal and policy gaps. Now, so first case that came for the gender neutral approach is Sakshi versus Union of India 1997, which is came in the Law Commission 172 report, which is talking about the male rape victims and the gender neutral applications of the law for the Law Commission. Right. Second is talking about the case Priya Patel versus State of Madhya Pradesh 2006, where a woman was accused of a gang rape, but the court observed that a woman cannot be said to have intention to commit a rape. Like I already said, that biologically it will be very impossible a woman to say a man that I want to commit a rape, right? Third case that we have been talking about, the National Legal Services Authority versus Union of India 2012, the Supreme Court expressly held that a transgender person should be recognized as a third gender and enjoy all the fundamental rights while also being entitled for the specific benefits in the education and employment. Fourthly, if we talk about the POSH Act, which came through the Vishaka guidelines, Vishaka was the state of Rajasthan 1997, in which was the landmark cases where the sexual harassment guidelines were being issued, talking about the workplace that the depravity in the minds of the victims. So the guidelines were being talking about the duty of the employer or other responsible persons in the workplaces and other institutions. The sexual harassment definitions was being widened. There's the physical contact and advances, the demand or the request of sexual favors, sexually colored remarks showing pornography, or any unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of the sexual nature. Thirdly, if we talk about the preventive steps were established, like the committee, internal committee I already discussed, the disciplinary action, the complaint mechanism, the complaint committee, that there should be an internal committee being set up in an organizations, the awareness programs and the training should be there on the regular basis, so that each and every sexual harassment reporting that has been happening in that organization should be reported. The compliances should be followed. The board report and the director's report should be stating that all the complaints that have been addressed should be given in that annual report. Like if the company has been receiving 10 sexual harassment reports, so out of that, how many has been resolved, how many are being in the investigation procedure, how much has been the inquiry procedure being taken up. So these all policies and these all reports should be published by the organizations in which more than 10 employees have been working. So in the Vishaka guideline, these all things were being discussed. The criminal proceedings, if we are talking only about our Indian Penal Code, then how the proceedings will take places. Only if we talk about the POSH Act, then how the proceedings will be take places. So these were the guidelines that were being issued under the Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan 1997. Lastly, we talk about the case of Sudhir Jhaku versus Casey Jhaku. In this, the Delhi High Court has highlighted the protection for the male rape victims under the Indian Penal Code provisions, and the court has also said that the male victims were owed to the same rights and protection as the female victims for the same crime without any distinction that has been made on the basis of their gender. So this was also been discussed in this case. Now, lastly, we have been discussing the recommendations that can be opted for the gender neutral laws in our India. The first is a training and awareness program, the regular workshop and the session, the specialized training for the internal committee has to be set up so that the working can be smoothly and functionable, and creating a gender neutrality approach in our POSH policies too. Secondly, recommendation is the comprehensive policy design. If we talk about that the language should be gender inclusive in nature. Secondly, the regulatory policies review should also be given. Like if we talk about the POSH policies that have been designed in such a way that it is protecting both a male employee also and a female employees also. So the obligations of the employer and employee should be well drafted so that there can be no discrimination on that ground too. Thirdly, if we talk about the safe reporting mechanism, what happens in this mechanism? The HR is creating, with the help of these digital tools, it is creating such a clear instructions that you can file your sexual harassment case over here and your name will not be displayed to us that this has been happened to this employee in our organization. But later on, when it comes to an inquiry procedure, then the name will be disclosed that this employee was being harassed by this employee, and this has to be made with the confidential clause that have been inculcated in our posh policies, right? Except during the investigation procedure only, the employer and the employee will get to know that yes, whether they have been ensuring the justice or not, the evidences are on the plaintiff and defendant side, both have been looked forth with it, and then the ensuring that the justice has been delivered to both the employee, the harasser or the victim or perpetrator, I can say about what to accept during the investigation process and protection against any retaliation, multi-awareness reporting. What happens, many of the aggrieved women are not being able to write their reports. They don't know how to file this report. So in that also organizations and the committee members help them that if the woman has been giving a written consent, then behalf of her, the co-worker, any relative or any HRC member, the National Rights Women Commission member can also write a complaint against that aggrieved woman that this woman has been facing the sexual harassment at so and so time, at so and so place by that person. So this can also be addressed in that issue. That the safe reporting mechanism can also take place in this case. Lastly, if we talk about the consistent enforcement, which is talking about supporting the victims, clear consequences for the harassment, investigations has been conducted without any biasness, that whether a male employee or a female employee or an employer or an employee, co-worker, team worker, peer, colleagues, whether you know or not, without the biasness, the reporting has to be done, the investigation has to be conducted. Also, the consequences are to be set forth with it. Like in the POSH policies and in the POSH Act, the clear consequences are being given. Like if a person who has been harassing someone, so he might be getting termination, or he might be getting any penalty, he might not be getting any promotion in that role. So these are some of the consequences that have been clearly mentioned and been followed by various of the organizations too. Now, coming up with the conclusion of this presentation, we're just talking about that the gender neutral approach to the harassment laws have been ensuring the fairness and inclusivity for all the individuals, regardless of their gender identity or the expression. It helps to create a more equitable environment by acknowledging and addressing the unique challenges which have been faced by the men, women, transgender, non-binary, or gender fluid individuals. Gender neutral legal frameworks are not just about compliances, but they are also about creating a safe and inclusive culture for safety, respect, and empowerment. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your valuable insights. Now I invite all participants to engage in the question and answer round, where you are free to ask questions to Sakshi ma'am. Sakshi ma'am, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the first question is, which everybody has posed, is that how can gender-neutral legal frameworks for rape ensure equitable protection for all genders, including men, non-binary, and transgender individuals, while addressing the societal biases? And also, please explain the different kinds of bail and the procedure. Uh, Sakshi ma'am, are you there?
Addressing this question by yes, am I
Yes, ma'am.
audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You're audible.
Yes, yes. So addressing this question by stating that as I already told you that the rape definition has been given, a man who is committing a rape, right? So in that, a gender neutrality has not been approachable. But while we talk about the bail applications that have been filed before the court by stating the procedural law that have been given under a CRPC, but the new laws have been given, but the new procedures have been inculcated in that are 2023 new criminal bills, right? So the procedure has been very different from the past procedure that we were been following. So in that, there is some amount of gender neutrality has been approachable, but not in wider aspect, I can say in that. In my personal opinion, yes, there can be gender neutrality in every cases. But if I already talked about this rape, particularly rape we have been talking about, for a woman, it will be never biologically, it will be very impossible to say a man that I want to commit a rape, right? So in that case, in every law, we can talk about that, yes, we need a gender.
Sakshi ma'am, are you there?
I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
So in that conclusion, I would like to say that in every case, we can say that a gender neutrality has to be approached, right? So it will be very impossible for a woman to say a man that I want to commit a rape for you, right? So in that, both have been facing some type of a sexual assault and experiencing, but a woman is facing much more than a man that has been declaring, been saying that. But while we talk about the bail procedures that have been taking places before the court, stating that a man has been harassed by a woman in the workplaces. So in that, the posh policy has been playing a major role in that. So that a male employee has also been ensuring a justice in that a female employee can be terminated, then the female employee can be penalized with a penalty in that case, or maybe not being suspended for a week or a 2 weeks. So these are some of the major drawbacks that have been given in that. For but for the male employee also, if we talk about, then there are also the dowry provisions that are being given and protecting the male from that. Then in divorce cases also, if we talk about, the female employees are asking more than an alumni or a maintenance in that cases, like they're asking for a lack of amount so that they can have a good and luxury life in that case. But no, so in these all approaches are to be looked not only from the societal aspect, but also what are given in that black and white languages that. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Next question.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the next question is that harassment of men should also be taken seriously. So, what are the provisions and steps taken by legislation and judiciary for it?
Want to make such laws that a man can also be protected. In dowry, there are some of the provisions which have been protecting the men. But in the IPC, we talk about Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, there are some of the provisions only been talking about the men, but not for the women case. Like when we are talking about the acid attack, the definition itself says whosoever is doing that an acid attack. So in that case, a man can also be facing that acid attack, or a woman is also been facing that acid attack. So in that, we are creating such a gender neutrality approach. So in some of the if you read any of the bare provisions or any of the bare languages that have been given of disrobing or outraging the modesty of a woman that have been clearly stating for the woman itself, right? But if we talk about any of the assault or a criminal force definition, so in that definition, it has been given whosoever. So we are being considering that a man or a woman both are being in sexual assault or any of the criminal force. So in that case, we have been creating a gender neutrality in that case.
Okay. Ma'am, the last question is, uh, why do the governments to date not bring laws that cater to harassment, rape, and domestic violence with a gender neutral stance? Like, for example, the very definition of rape starts with a man is said to commit rape. Thus, the possibility of cases where a woman may violate a man's modesty or be a rapist is ruled out completely. Is it only because it's best for business?
See, I'm already working in this legislation to bring approach for the gender neutrality. So we have been drafting such a laws that it can be having a gender neutrality. If we talk about this POSH Act only 2013, in that the preamble itself is saying an act is to provide a protection against the sexual harassment of a woman at a workplace. So over here, of a woman, why it has been written. But various of the organizations are being creating this act itself considering to be gender neutral in their organization so that our male employees can also be protected under this posh policies. So bare reading of this is talking about that is against the sexual harassment of a woman at a workplace. But no, the drafting of the laws and the drafting of the clauses that have been taking place in the posh policies that have been functioning in any of the organization or the workplaces, so that they have been creating a gender neutrality in that case, right? So the posh policy is not only for the protection of the woman. The preamble is stating that, right, by the language if you are reading it, so it is stating for the protection of the woman, but depending on this implementation, depending on the recommendations that are been bringing by that internal committees in every organizations, they have their own perspective that whether this law has to be gender neutral or not. So whether we are talking about the gender neutrality, we have already been passing the transgender act that we already discussed, for the sexual child abuse that we have been discussing, the POSCO act, right? So these are bringing gender neutrality, but in every language we can add that woman or a man or any person, that has to be looked into it, that in which matters we can bring such types of a thing that it is creating a gender neutrality in every sector. If we talk about the reservation sector, the transgender are being getting a reservation, the scheduled caste is getting a reservation, the OBC is getting a reservation, the general is getting a reservation in that cases. So in that also, the gender neutrality is not there, right?
Yes.
So each and every sector to be looked for, then only we can bring a legislation which is talking about the gender neutrality.
Yes, ma'am. Got it. Thank you so much, ma'am. Since we come to the end of our session, we sincerely thank Sakshi ma'am for accepting our invitation and delivering such an informative session. We trust that the audience found it both interesting and knowledgeable. Thank you once again, ma'am, and we eagerly anticipate the opportunity to host you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.